Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into VaShawn F. Head's The Rise of the Phoenix. And let me tell you, this book argues that the reality you know isn't what it seems, that it's actually a carefully constructed illusion. So let's pull back the curtain.
Right from the start, the book hits you with this powerful premise. It sets up this choice. You're either dominated or you coexist. The author's basically saying, I'm done being dominated. This really sets the stage for the whole journey into what he calls the illusion. Okay, let's dive into this.
So the core argument of the book is that basically everything we think we know, and I mean everything, from the words we use to the history we're taught, is all part of a grand illusion. It's a system that he argues is designed to keep us under control.
According to Head, if you want to see the truth, you first have to recognize this veil of illusion that we've all been raised under. And he builds his case on two really powerful pillars: the deliberate manipulation of language and the strategic weaponization of history.
First up, let's talk about language. Head's whole position is that the very tools we use to think, our words, have been subtly twisted and altered over time specifically to change our perception of reality.
He uses the 1859 Webster's Dictionary as a kind of baseline. And here, religion isn't just some belief system. It's defined as an action. It's the performance of duties in obedience to a divine command. The author argues that this very specific definition is absolutely key. And this is where it gets really interesting. Head argues that this original structured definition has been deliberately worn down. You can see how religion gets redefined over time into this much broader, more subjective, social-cultural system. By taking away that strict requirement of a divine lawgiver, he claims the word has been totally stripped of its power. It's gone from being about concrete actions to just a vague concept.
Okay, so the second pillar of his argument is history. And this part centers on a very influential and frankly controversial document that the author believes is nothing less than a blueprint for control: the Willie Lynch letter. Now, it's really important to note something here. While this text is central to Head's argument, most historians today view it as a 20th century forgery, not an authentic document from 1712. But for the author, where it came from is less important than the divisive formula it describes. This strategy of using differences in age, color, and gender to maintain total control.
He points to passages just like this as proof of a deliberate strategy. Pit people against each other, female versus male, old versus young, to make sure their ultimate trust is placed only in their oppressors.
For Head, this isn't just some historical text. He draws a direct line from this divisive ideology to a really painful legacy of racial trauma. He argues that events like these, they aren't isolated tragedies. He sees them as the predictable outcomes of a centuries-old system of control.
And this is where the author's big, sweeping, historical argument turns inward. He connects this whole societal illusion directly to his own personal experience. He argues these large-scale systems of control, they don't just stay out there in society. They actually replicate themselves inside our families and inside our own minds.
Then, in a pretty jarring shift, he reveals his own history of severe childhood abuse. But he frames it not just as a private tragedy, but as a direct result of the same cycles of trauma he sees in society, a cycle that he was absolutely determined to break. This leads him to argue that we're all living in a state of what he calls hereditary psychosis. That's his theory that unaddressed trauma just gets passed down through generations, and it fundamentally shapes how we see the world and how we treat one another.
So if you're faced with this overwhelming illusion and this huge legacy of trauma, what's the solution? What can you actually do? Well, the author offers a practical method for breaking free, and it all starts with how we communicate.
His solution is a communication method he calls stop, look, listen, think, speak. The goal here is to replace those impulsive, emotional reactions with conscious, mindful interaction. For him, this is the starting point. This is how you begin to break free from the cycles of trauma that keep us trapped.
And this is his ultimate message, really. You might not be able to dismantle the entire system on your own, but you have absolute control over your own thoughts, your own actions, and your own words, your own contribution to all the noise.
And so in the end, the author doesn't leave us with an answer. He leaves us with a final, provocative question. He's encouraging all of us to just examine our own reality and ask, what if?